Okay, hi everyone. Today I'm just going to be sort of covering how you can create this Kamehameha effect. Um, it's just a combination of a few different things. It's pretty much just a couple of beams along with some basic particles. Nothing more to it. This is just a beginner-friendly sort of guide on how you can achieve this, and I'm going to be covering the basics on how to pretty much make your own textures. It's a little bit more advanced and it does require some software to do it, but I just wanted to run you through how I would do this. Um, Pretty much the main focus of this guide is going to be to take you through After Effects. This is what we're going to be using to create the spikes at the start and end of the beam, as well as the same texture for the middle of the beam here, the black part of the beam that you can see here as well. And yeah, I'm just going to be sort of showcasing how you can go about creating this, the techniques involved. But don't panic, don't worry if you can't, if you don't have access to After Effects or any of the other tools here. We may use Photoshop, we may not, it just depends. I'll supply the textures that I'm using today inside of the video description, so don't panic if you don't have this, but I just want to show you the sort of process, and hopefully it can help people with their own types of effects, because again, you could do a whole load of stuff with this. It doesn't have to just be used for this one particular thing. So yeah, what I'm going to do is in Studio, I've got this little Goku here. I'm just going to try and duplicate and mimic what I created here. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to add in a part. We're just going to set up the basic structure of this. So just bear with me. Just do something like this. Now, this is pretty much just going to be the setup for this. I'm just going to create like the beam itself to start with. Then we're just going to pretty much create the actual custom textures and things like that. So we'll start off here, we'll add in a beam, and we'll just call this inner beam, because the main thing that we're going to try and create here is there is sort of an inner and outer beam happening here. That you can see the blue tint on the edges. That's actually a beam behind this white beam. It's just sitting behind it. So we're going to try and replicate that. So with our beam, the way beams work is you actually have to use attachments for this, and these will also come in handy when we start to create the actual particle emitters as well. But we're just going to name this one, we're just going to add an attachment, call it start, and just for the sake of this we're just going to duplicate, set this to end. In the end we're going to drag this out just to a comfortable position, something like that, something you'd expect to see with the Kamehameha. Next thing is we're going to set the attachment. So if you click on the beam, you can set the start and end for the beam. This is just very basic stuff. And what I'll do is we'll just hide this part just so we can get rid of it, so that we're not looking at it, just so it doesn't get in the way of our effects. And just in case I decide to script this later, I'm just going to anchor it and set the can collide to false. The scripting stuff may be in a separate video. I'm just sort of targeting this for beginners only. So yeah, if you know all of this, then it won't be too new for anyone who's watching. But for anyone who's just starting out with their VFX, I'm hoping this sort of gives you an idea of how something like this can be made. So with beams, you've got a width for the start and end positions. So I'm just going to pop in a number here just to test it. We're just going to do something like 3 or 4, just to get the general feel of it. Because basically all the beam is really is just a square. Now you can obviously change this with your own custom texture, but for our sake we just want to have a solid colour. We don't need anything more than that. It's quite simple. So what I'll do is, at the moment we can sort of see through it. Now that's normal, that's expected, because we've got about 0.5 worth of transparency, and that's basically covering across the whole thing. So if I just go into here, what I'll do is I'll just make this a solid colour. So anything at the top of the graph is going to go transparent, as you can see in the image here. So the start of it is invisible, but because the beam is going to be one solid colour, we're just going to do this. Drag the two of those to the bottom, and it's going to give us basically a solid line. You see that background there because there is a highlight, so you can set highlights to basically go in front or behind stuff. That's why you can see that, but you won't be able to see anything else. And yeah, and I've got it set to face to camera so that whenever we move our camera, it doesn't actually break the illusion. So you can see it sort of spins and turns with it. Now we're going to sort of hide that in the other effects, but this is sort of what we're trying to get here. And just to make it a little nicer, we're going to bring the light influence down and bring the light emission up. That'll give it this nice glow. And we'll just keep it white for the moment, but we'll do something, that's a bit much, we'll do, don't know, if you play with the values, you can sort of get what you need, but I'll do something like 1.8 or something, 1.08, sorry. What I'll do is I'll just duplicate this, we'll do outer beam, we'll make it a slight bit larger, so we'll do 5 and 5. Because it's obviously the same colour, we're not seeing much, so I'm just going to change the colour to give it that sort of faint blue tint on the edges here. So we'll do something like, I don't know, something like that. And we'll also change the brightness factor here, getting something like this. And because this beam is sharing the same space with the Z offset, it may cause some flickering issues if we move around. It may or may not, because there's so much brightness involved here. But what I like to do is just to avoid any problems in the future, we're going to make the inner beam sit on top of the outer beam. So the inner beam, I'm just going to put this at a higher value, so we're just going to do like 0.1. And what that's going to do is it's going to force the white beam to sit on top of the outer beam. And that way there is no real issues. If I change the colour, I'll show you what I mean. So if we turn this off and put the actually that's a bad example. If I just undo that and we do like a whole other colour, a red or something, or purple. Yep, so that's what we're getting. So you can see how the inner beam is sitting on top of that. Now just undo some of that stuff, but that's basically the idea of what we're going for, and because it's facing camera, that's what we're going to do. And the general idea here is the middle of the beam here is actually going to be a separate texture that I'm going to create inside of After Effects, and we're going to use the same exact texture for the actual spikes at the end. And yeah, I may or may not make the Kamehameha like beam sphere. Like as you can see here, there's like a sphere, but this is just a very basic circle texture. You can pretty much make that in any sort of photo editing software, or you can do it in like Paint or something. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. You can also grab it from the toolbox or from other places as well, so there isn't too much involved here. But what I'll do is I'm going to move on to the part of the video that covers After Effects. So if you don't have this, you can follow along and see how it's created, but don't worry, I'll put the link to the actual texture down below. And I'm also just going to open source this entire beam that we're creating today. So yeah, so I've got After Effects here on a separate, on an empty canvas. Sorry, on this. So we'll do a new composition, and for this texture, we're going to do a 1K texture, which basically just means it's a 1024 by 1024 texture type. We're not going to focus too much on the duration today. We're not going to be making any flipbooks or anything like that, but we're just going to be basically working with this small little texture window here. And the general idea here is we're trying to create a texture that's sort of like spikes, like the spiky anime lines you see all the time, like in Dragon Ball or any other type of show. The way we sort of go about doing that inside of After Effects is if I right click and create a new solid, you can colour it whatever you want, just press OK, that will give you a solid colour for the whole canvas. And the general idea here is I'm just going to grab the pen tool, we're just going to do some just random spikes. This part doesn't really matter all that much from what I've found during my testing with this, but you know, you can try and shape it as best you like, but we're just sort of going to create a sort of shape, just put a mask in here. So when you click on this tool, this pen tool, You click on your solid. If you've got your white solid selected and you draw something, you're actually creating a mask for it. So if anyone's new to After Effects, this is basically what we're trying to go for. And right now it looks absolutely terrible. So if you click on this little button here, you can actually switch off the background transparency. So if you're wondering how that's working like that, that's how you can do that. And a real key thing to note is if you do make textures for Roblox, just be very careful about what you're doing with the black background, because that will cause issues when it comes to lighting. So yeah, just bear with us. So yeah, if you do that, it just makes it a little bit more clean to view. So I'm going to hit the F key. That's just going to bring up this mask feather, and we're going to drag this up. So what that'll do is it's going to basically give us sort of like this sort of shape, and we're just going to hit the S key for scale. I'm just going to scale it down just so that it fits in the canvas a little better. And the idea here is we're going to be using an effect called roughen edges. Now this is used all the time for different types of effects, so we'll pop that on there, and this is sort of what we're going to get. It looks pretty bad for the moment, but I'm just going to do some quick edits here. So if we do this to spiky, this is what we sort of end up with. If I change the stretch for the width and height, you can sort of get this. So this is what we're sort of getting here, and you can already tell this is sort of giving us kind of what we're looking for in terms of the anime style effect. So I'm just going to make a quick few more edits here. This is all just messing with values really to get what I'm sort of going for. The idea is to sort of try and get this sort of shape, and we can also mess with not the scale. If we do the F key again and do feathering, sort of get this. So this is what I'm kind of going for. And you can already sort of tell this is how we created the black texture here. So it's basically just a texture. If I turn down the speed here, see it's sort of like jagged lines, and that's sort of how I did it. So that's how you basically create this. And yeah, you can also mess with the edge sharpness. You can actually do that and make it sort of faded out like this. So yeah, this would be perfect actually for the beam, but just for the sake of this, we're just so it fits a little nicer, I'm just gonna click and drag, sort of make it like this size roughly. Oops, and we're also just gonna click on the white solid, just drag it up a little, so that we've got it sort of centered here. And we'll click this, and I'm just going to do this because it's removing the transparent background. So in order to, we're going to export this as one of our first textures that we're going to create for this. So if you go to composition, and if you go to save frame as file, it'll, well actually that's probably not the best. If you go to composition, add to render queue, click on best settings, you can basically set the time span to be 1 second, because we don't actually need anything more than that. Or in fact, you can just put it to 0 seconds, it's no big deal. It should just be left with one duration, because we just want one frame for this. And if you click on the output module, what you can do is you can change the format to PNG sequence. Just make sure that you've got the RGB set to RGB plus alpha, or the transparency won't come across. Hit OK, and we're just going to save this out to one of our output folders. Now, as you can tell, I've already did this, so I'm just going to quickly create a new folder. I'm going to do YouTube guide Kamehameha. We'll just save this in here. So we'll do save, and if you hit the render key, pretty much that's all you need to do there. And if we go to Roblox, just going to add this here. So we'll go back to our part, and just so that it's easy for us, we'll just copy paste probably the outer, no, maybe the inner beam. We'll copy the inner beam, that's easiest. So we'll do that, and we'll do black for that one, and we'll do a texture, add image, and we shall just add this real quick. Just let me open this up on my other monitor just so that you're not seeing. Just so I'm not leaking anything, just bear with me while I get this open. Okay, now that we've got this sort of added in for our texture, I'm just going to actually turn off the other beams just so we can see what we're dealing with. So as you can see, sort of getting this, and it's already looking okay. But we can do some edits and tweaks to this. Now, because I've exported this out with the background as transparent, you can take away the light emission, and that'll give you like a dark color. So you can change the color here to black, and it'll give it a full black matted look. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm trying to go for. As you can see, it's sort of very harshly cutting in and out at the edges, so we may need to fade it in over time using the transparency. But if I turn on the other beams for the moment, you can sort of see what we're getting. As you can see, it's sort of overlapping. That's because we've duplicated the last beam, so it's actually sharing the same texture space. So you need to update the offset, and this is going to sit on top of everything. So I'm just going to do 0.2 for this. That's going to mean that that sits on top of everything. And as you can see, as I was mentioning there is some clipping at the start and at the end, which doesn't look great. You could hide that with other effects, but just for this video, I'm just going to hide it. So if we do transparency, we're going to fade it off at the start, bring it in, and fade it in so that it's actually starting a little later. Roughly about there. If I bring this back, it should start sort of spawning better there, and we'll just do the same here. So we'll bring this up, fade it off at the end, bring this down, so that way it's doing the same here. So it's kind of fading off before it reaches the edge of the beam. And what we'll do is we may just play with the width and scale for this, because it's a little squished in the centre here. So if we do something like 6, maybe a bit too big, but yeah, you're just looking for something that's not going to break it too much. Do something like that. Or maybe that's a bit too big, we'll do 5 and 5. And yeah, we'll up the speed on this obviously to make it look a little nicer. So if we do like something like 5, you see we're sort of getting that, and we can also play with the texture length and sort of get this. So you can play with the different styles that you're looking for. And I think if we duplicate this, yeah, you get quite fast. Yeah, maybe not duplicate, but yeah, that's basically the idea of how I created this. This one is a little bit of a different texture. I took a little bit more time because I wanted to try and actually fit it into the beam. So if you really wanted to do that, you could try and, you know, stretch this out like this. Oh, whoops! You could do something like this. Maybe do that and mess with the feathering a little bit more. You know, give it like more volume in the center here. But yeah, it's good enough for a starter beam, I would imagine. It's not bad at all. So we'll move on to the next part of the video, which is going to be the main spikes. So what we'll do is we'll do using the existing texture. We're going to pretty much just use there's a cool effect called warp. What that's going to allow it to do is it's going to allow us to sort of make this sort of like into an arc shape. We'll just change this from arc to maybe shell upper, or we can do maybe arc upper, something like that. And if we do vertical distortions, sort of see we're getting the sort of fan shape. This is used for all sorts of different stuff. You can also change the bend type as well. Get some pretty wacky effects, but the goal for this video today is just to sort of create this fan looking shape here. Just shift drag this down just so that it's fitting within the confines of the comp, and do something like that. Feathering, maybe something like this. And yeah, I mean that's sort of what I'm trying to get. It's not the best. You can obviously mess with this. You can add other effects in here such as glow and other types of effects as well to really give it more colour, more depth. So I can do that maybe. And we'll get rid of the black background again, and we're just going to use this. So if I go to composition, add to render queue. We're just going to do the same thing again, so we shall make this 0, that will give us 1 second of duration. Set this to PNG sequence, RGB alpha, and then we'll just export it out to our comp. So just bear with me while I do that. So we'll just render this out. Whoops, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we'll do this. We'll just do spikes, YouTube. Save that, render that out real quick. And the idea here is we're actually going to try and create this. So this is using a technique that is, it's just a particle and emitter inside of an attachment, and then we're just using the velocity parallel orientation to sort of get that look. So we can use the start attachment, or if you really want to, you can create another attachment just to keep everything separated. You can do like spikes. And inside of the spikes we're going to do a particle emitter, and in here we're just going to add the image that we got here. And if I just quickly add that real quick, create. Takes a minute for it to come in, that's sort of what we're getting. And just for the sake of this, we're just going to turn off these beams just so we can see what we're doing. So just bear with me. And yes, okay, so what we're going to do first of all is this is already emitting the wrong direction, so we're just going to set this to front. It's going to go out this way. I'm going to set the lifetime to about 2 seconds just initially. We can change that later just so it's not going as far. We are going to change the orientation to be velocity parallel. Now what that's actually doing, there's a really great plugin actually that you can use to see what this is doing. It's called ROS plugin, ROS particle emitter, plugin. And if you click on edit particle, you'll actually see here a very faint white line. That sort of previews where your particles are going. Roblox doesn't have this by default, sadly. So velocity parallel basically forces the image to run parallel to the lines here that you can see. So if we were to rotate this by 90 degrees, in fact maybe do it negative 90, and if you give it a spread angle, now because it's inside of an attachment, if you do a spread angle on this, it's going to fan it out like this. So you can see the invisible lines are all fanning out. We'll do like a 45 degree angle, or maybe even a 65 degree angle. And a really cool trick is if you add an acceleration as well, you can sort of get the lines to curve. So if we do like a -5, you're sort of getting this shape. And as you can see, all of our images are following the lines. That's because we've got it set to the velocity parallel. It's running parallel to those lines. We can mess with the orientation, or rotation, sorry, of the actual individual image that we're trying to get. So the idea here is I'm trying to bunch all of these together at the start and have them animate outwards through these lines to get this sort of effect. Now they're obviously really small, but we're going to edit some more stuff. Try and get this looking good. So we'll do a size of about 5, something like that. And what we'll do is we'll just mess with the transparency, obviously. So we'll have it fade in at the start, and we'll have it fade out at the end. That's usually my go-to method, just so that it's not as harsh, so it's not like, just blinking into existence. And a really good technique here is, we could probably mess with the, what could we do? Mess with the squash a little, I think, is the best call here. So squash just lets you stretch the image. So if we stretch it at the start of the image, we can get it sort of doing this, and if we stretch it at the end, we're getting more of the lines coming out like this. And of course, it's a little too, too slow. And the way you would speed this up is you would have to basically mess around with the lifetime here. So if we do like 0.5, it's like way faster, but the lines get shorter obviously. So you can increase the speed here as well. So you can do something like 20, something like that. Sort of goes out like this. And there's not enough of them, so if we do a rate of, let's say about 150, something like that, you can sort of see what I was getting. and it looks, yeah, the squash is looking a little poor, so I'll try and fix that. So we do something like this. If I just put it to a value of 0 actually, and have this sort of set to 0 for the most of it. Have something like this. We may need to edit the edges actually of this texture inside of Photoshop, just to call this part out. May look a little nicer, because I'm liking the look of this already, but we might need to do that. So yeah, I'll do that real quick. So there is a nice website, sorry, called Photopea. It's sort of like a free Photoshop, which is brilliant for use. So all you need to do is import the image. So I'm just going to do that on my other monitor. Just bear with me while I get this imported for you guys. So if we bring this Spikes image in, so this is what it sort of looks like. This is what we exported from After Effects, and really the only thing I'm going to be doing here is we're just going to be erasing some of the bottom part of this because the spikes are a little bit too much. So if you go to the eraser tool and just grab like a faint brush like this, the first one here, no hardness and just a size of 15 to start with. If you press the bracket keys, it works just the same way Photoshop does. So if you know Photoshop, this is going to be quite easy to follow along. If you don't know Photoshop, this is a great tool. You can make all sorts of stuff in here. This is just as good as Photoshop normally. So you just use these bracket keys on your keyboard. And if we just erase some of this, because we're using a nice light brush, you can see it sort of fades away. You can't really see much. If I add a new layer and we just paint this black and put this is what we're sort of doing. We're sort of just erasing the edges here. So I've just put a black background just so that you can see what we're doing, sort of thing. I click on this background, go to the eraser tool. You see how we're sort of just nicely fading off like this. And that's sort of the idea of what we're going for. I'm also just going to get rid of this part here, and we can just do some touch-ups and clean up. And you can do a lot more in here, obviously, but I don't want to make the video too long. So if you just click on the background, all you need to do now is just go to File, Save As, and save it as the image. So I'll do that in my other monitor just now. So we'll export this as a PNG. It's absolutely fine. And we shall save it to our desktop. So just bear with me, I'll be back in 2 seconds while I've got this saved. Okay, that's fine, we've got that saved. So I'm gonna just basically replace this texture with the one that we have that we've just edited. So I'm gonna import this, add this, this is the fixed version, create, and this should just sort of get rid of these horrible bits at the start. So yeah, something like that. See here, what I'll do is I'll use the transparency actually, and we'll fade it off even more at the start. And something like this. There we go, it's not as bad. So if I bring this down, maybe just so we can retain some of the colour. And speaking of colour, what I'll do is I'm just going to bring the light influence down, just so that we get access to the brightness value. We're going to put up the light emission up, and we're also going to change the colour of this so that we can sort of mimic the colour of a Kamehameha. So doing something like this. And yeah, we can edit some of the brightness values here. So we can do something like that. And yeah, something like this. We may need to increase the rate, so if we do something like 250, something like that, you can sort of see what we're getting before. I may need to edit some of the squash as well. Do something like this. This is what we're getting. So it's sort of just playing with the values really, just seeing what you can get. That. If we do this to like 0.25, something like that. Do like 35. It doesn't look too bad. It's a little different from my main one that I created. I did spend a little bit more time on that one, but yeah, if we increase this to maybe like 90, or maybe like 75 or something, we're getting this now. And we'll increase this even further. Yeah, something like that. And if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams again, you can see what we're getting. So if we turn on the beams Get something like this. And again, you can spend a lot more time playing with the values, editing the actual image inside of Photoshop to get it perfect. We can maybe edit the acceleration to maybe be like -15 instead. That way we're getting more of a curve on it. So if we do like -25 or I don't know, something silly. What happens if we do 50? All I'm trying to do is just control these lines. -250. Like that. Now it's looking like this. It's looking a little nicer. And if we take the spikes, put them like here, and if we change the size, we can make it so that they sort of spawn in smaller, like that, and come in larger. This. Then we can have it sort of do that, or we can maybe make it do that and fade off. It's really up to you. You can choose whatever you want to do with this, obviously. We set that, we can make it go from doing that to maybe this, something like that. And yeah, I know the rate's quite large, but you would only be doing this for like a client-sided effect anyway, and you know, this would be a perfect place to put that sphere circle in, just for the end of the Kamehameha itself. Now, just for the sake of it, I'm just going to pop this at the end as well. So if we do spikes, I'm just going to duplicate this. We'll do spikes end, and we'll drag this across. Whoops, we'll drag this across. That's actually a good point. Before I do that, on the spikes itself, on the particle emitter, you want to make sure it's locked to the part. The reason for that is if you start moving these, it won't have any drag, so it'll just be like this, and it just makes it a lot nicer if you're scripting it. It doesn't go everywhere. So yeah, duplicate the beam spikes at the end here. We're just going to rotate this entire attachment, so we're just going to rotate this on the x axis. Sorry. So we'll do the orientation. We'll do 0 on the x axis. Put this at the end. So we're getting something like that. So spikes, and we'll do something like spikes end, or what have you, you know. So yeah, if we grab the spikes end and the end together and move this out, sort of see this is what we're getting. And with the spikes end, you could edit this one so it's a little different, so it's not an identical duplicate of the first one. And you can obviously change the squash, scale, size, everything you would like for this one. You can do something like this. I would set to something like that. And for the circle, it would genuinely just be a case of going into the toolbox. So I'll just grab a quick texture. You can make one inside of Photoshop as well, but I'll just grab a quick texture for that one. Okay, and as you can see, I just went into the toolbox, search for circle. There's a circle here. You just right click, copy the asset ID, and well, pretty much what we're going to do here is we're just going to create the sort of circle part. So in here, you can use the same spike attachment, or if you want to keep everything separate like I do, you can do an attachment. We'll do this, we'll call this like sphere. Do a particle emitter in here, and just for the sake of it, just so we can see everything, we're going to drag it away for the moment, paste in the circle. It's just going to give us a nice circle, and yeah, you don't actually need to do much with this. You can put the lifetime to like 0.85 seconds or something like that. The rate can be about 8, and we can put the speed to 0. That's just going to give us like a nice circle. The circle's got kind of a horrible jagged outline, so if that happens, you can just change the size a little. It's not the best looking thing in the world. May need to grab a different circle, so if you grab this one instead, copy asset ID. Yeah, something like that. What about this one? Yeah, that one's better. It's not. It's just. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could just make one real quick and just import it in. It's no trouble. I'll just put this into the video description as well. So I'm just going to lock this to the part, and just for the sake of this video, we'll do an outer and inner sphere. So the outer sphere is going to be the blue part of the sphere. So I'm actually just going to take the same colours from the spikes, just so that it matches. We'll come back into the outer sphere, paste them in, get something like that. The light influence 0, light influence up like this, something like that. And if we copy this, duplicate, we'll do inner, do a solid white, and we'll put it behind, so we'll do like negative 0.1, something like that, so it sits behind it. That's sort of how I'd go about creating the ball for the Kamehameha. So sort of put it here, somewhere like that, and we'll just take both of these and we'll just scale up. So we'll do a size of like, geez, a bit much, we'll do like 2 in here like that. 2 like that, and we'll just drag this Goku back a little, and yeah, it's something like that. The circles may be a little smaller than what I intended, so if we do 2.5, or sorry, 2.5, something like that. And yeah, it's just basically just need to try and get a feel for it, and yeah, I mean, it looks not bad, I suppose. And then you could just duplicate this, pop this to the end of the beam if you really wanted to. You may or may not be able to see this when you're doing your actual VFX, but you can do that. The end. And when you come to scripting this, all you would need to really do is you would just need to grab all of these attachments. So you would need to grab the spikes at the end attachment, and the sphere at the end, which I didn't think I named correctly. Yeah, I didn't name it correctly. Sphere, this would be the sphere end. Just always remember to make sure you name things correctly. So these 3 are all the end spheres. So you would do something like this. And you would literally just script it so that this tweens outwards. Something like this. Now this is a very basic Kamehameha beam. You can add so many more things. You can add like slashes, wind effects, all that good stuff. But yeah, I'm hoping this just sort of showcases the very basics of how you can create your own textures, use some tools to basically edit those textures and get something off the ground pretty fast, and just some of the techniques that you can use for beams, some of the settings you can set for particle emitters such as velocity parallel. I use it quite a lot for a lot of this type of thing. And this is just using the one texture for this, so you can use a whole bunch of different stuff. You can also mess around in the After Effects side of it, and you can obviously add in a lot more of these effects, presets, that sort of stuff. A really cool trick, actually, just as a sort of extra, is if you wanted to do some sort of, inverted type of effect. There's a cool thing I found the other day. If you do find edges and add that to whatever effect you're doing, you can sort of get a more spikiness on your texture. So that could be something you could experiment with. And you could also invert it, so you can get this sort of effect. So you can get like a negative effect. That's quite handy. Yeah, that can be used quite all over the place for a lot of good stuff. But yeah, so that sort of just makes the lines a lot sharper and a lot like more pronounced. But yeah, that's just a little extra tidbit. I'll cover a little bit more of After Effects and a little bit more of Photoshop stuff. There's a lot many more videos out there that are better than this one, obviously, that covers this stuff. But I'm just hoping this sort of does the beginners justice, so that you can get off the ground running with this stuff, and then obviously get better as time goes on, and then you can start doing your own stuff. But yeah, I'll put all of these textures into the description of the video, sorry, and I'll also put the download link for this particular Kamehameha beam, and you can do what you like with it. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.